Welcome back! I'm Tyler, you're watching I'm Telling Tyler, our write-in series where you can ask me questions, tell me the latest tea, and so long as it's at least Lolita adjacent, you can send your tea and or queries to imtellingtyler@gmail.com. So let's get started with our first submission of the evening from Cookie. And Cookie says, "Hello Tyler, I hope you're doing well. I'm 24 years old and I used to wear Lolita fashion during my teenage years. I had to stop because of money problems, health problems, and because of life in general. Now that I'm in a more stable living, I'm looking for a perfect cord to buy. But here's the thing. I've been living with my boyfriend for 2.5 years now, and he's never seen me wearing Lolita, and I was pretty anxious about his reactions. Fortunately, he just said, do whatever makes you happy. I was really excited and I started to share pictures with him of dresses and stuff I liked to have his opinion. But something was odd. He was giving quick answers or just changing the subjects. I was a little sad and thought he was embarrassed to imagine me wearing that in public, which I can understand, and he never really told me to stop or anything. I just stopped sharing pictures with him to make him not uncomfortable. Yesterday, he explained to me what was really happening. He likes the fashion and he thinks that it would be perfect for me, but he can't help but think about it in a kinky way. He knows that I would never use Lolita fashion in a kinky way, and he understands, but now things are kind of awkward. I don't want to give up on Lolita fashion, and I don't want both of us to feel awkward, and I don't want to leave my boyfriend just for frilly dresses. I know there's no perfect solution, but I really want to have your opinion. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this situation. Have a wonderful day, Tyler. Thanks for reading." Alright, Cookie, as complicated as your situation might feel right now, I think I have a very simple solution, and I'm gonna provide it to you via example. And that example is, let's say you have an urn. Your boyfriend is sexually attracted to the urn, and he asks you if he can stick his dick in your grandmother's ashes. Do you A, allow him to stick his zucchini in your ancestors? Or B, tell him, no, this is off limits, end of discussion? Obviously, anyone who isn't on an FBI watch list is going with option B. And it seems to me that you've come to the same conclusion here because you've already essentially told him that it's off the table, which is good and the adult thing to do. And the truth is, that's really the only thing you need to do. Because at the end of the day, while it is healthy and good and considerate to give some leeway for your partner's wants in the bedroom, there are certain things that are perfectly fine to keep off the table. Lolita fashion obviously being a safe haven from sexuality for so many people and so many survivors of trauma, for both women and other femme-adjacent groups that just don't want to deal with the male gaze in that way for whatever reason, it makes total sense for you to say, this one particular thing I am not comfortable with. That doesn't make you a bad girlfriend, and while I find it incredibly confusing as to why anyone would find all of this sexually attractive, there are absolutely people out there who would hump a doorknob, so I'm not about to judge when it comes to the spectrum of what human beings are willing to canoodle. So what I'm saying is, so long as you've had the conversation and he understands that this is off the table and he's gonna have to find something else to send up the flagpole, so to speak, and not in a shaming him manner, there's no reason for you guys to feel awkward about this. There are plenty of outfits out there that men find... So long as he's not being a creep about it and pressuring you in any way, like it really just comes down to mutual respect at that point. For instance, if cameraman turned out to be a huge pervert and I told him to stay out of my sock drawer and yet I came home and he was wearing it like a little hat.
So you have chosen death.
What I'm saying here is it's all about healthy boundaries. You don't necessarily have to do everything your boyfriend wants, and he doesn't necessarily have to do everything you want. And so long as it's made clear that you're not willing to do anything dressed like this for him that would... And I don't think there's anything unreasonable about setting that barrier and then going about your day. I think any partner that respects you is going to be fine with that. God knows there is enough nonsense on the internet for him to redirect that interest somewhere else. And if he cannot do that, that is definitely a him problem. So in short, just have the conversation, make sure he knows where the lines are, and go about with your Lolita life with full confidence. And as always, at the end of the day, it's always about consent. And if he's in any way involved in any kind of kinky community, he will know that and he'll respect it. And if he doesn't, we have a problem. So, thank you, Cookie, for writing in. I'm sorry you're having to go through that, but honestly, I think it's a lot more simple than it feels like. You just gotta have that conversation with your boyfriend, make sure he knows where the line is, and that's the bottom line. So let's move on to our next submission, and our next submitter did not give me a name, so we are going to call them Bonbon. And Bonbon says, "Hi, I have a little problem. I've been a fan of Lolita for 3 years now, and about a month ago, I bought my first cord. When I tried it on, I was very happy with myself because I have body dysmorphia and don't have the hourglass shape. When I showed my mom and her boyfriend, my mom was surprisingly very supportive. Sadly, I can't say the same about her boyfriend. He said I looked like a clown and a hooker. I wouldn't be mad about it if it was something that showed a lot of skin because I understand where that would come from, but no, I was wearing a blouse, tights, and gloves, so I was almost fully covered. And I generally just hate him since he has stolen $500 from my mother and has been sexually involved with someone underage. Plus, they always fight with my mother and constantly tell her she looks ugly. I don't know what to do because she won't break up with him. Signed, Bonbon." I'm gonna need a moment to process this. On the one hand, it's awesome that your mom is supportive, because sometimes that seems to be in short supply in alternative communities. But on the other, she is dating a douche canoe. A douche canoe that said, "I'm presuming to your face and with your mother present, told you that you looked like a clown and a hooker." A point that you said that you wouldn't be mad about had it been something that showed a lot of skin. I would like to disagree. No decent human being looks at the child of the person that they're dating and says, "Yeah, you look like a prostitute and a clown." And while I was reading this, I was honestly wondering what your age is, because it would be even worse if you were underage. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how old you are. There is no part of this that is redeemable. It's not even 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've got me yelling. What is wrong with him? The fact that he essentially called you a clown-faced prostitute in front of your own mother isn't even the craziest thing, because no, he's also stolen $500,000 from said mother and has been boinking a minor while telling the adult woman that he's dating that she's ugly. And yet none of these factors are enough to make her break up with him. What I'm saying is, I feel like I'm reading an installment of Jerry Springer, and I'm sorry. But all that said, to bring it back down into something I can contend with, what you essentially seem to be asking is, how can you continue to live your best Lolita life in spite of your mother dating the scum of the earth, refusing to break up with said scum of the earth, and now you're having to contend with the fallout of the nuclear meltdown that essentially seems to be your home environment. Now, all that said, what I'm gonna say next is gonna sound kind of callous, and it boils down to 2 things. 1, if you're living with them, move out as soon as possible. And 2, when it comes to the absolute garbage fire that your mother is dating, there is little to nothing you can do to get her to break up with him. The sad truth of the matter is that women in abusive relationships usually have to come to terms with the fact that they are in an abusive relationship and then deal with it on their own terms. Pushing them almost never fucking works, and unless she's reaching out for help herself, family interventions usually just make that person more distant, more bitter, more agitated, and less likely to come to you for help, as twisted as it sounds. And honestly, as someone who has known many women who grew up in twisted home environments who went on to date trash bag men, the tendency that these women have, not unlike your mom, to date douchebags often presents almost like a mental illness. And the reason I say that is because it often develops as the result of trauma. These women often grow up in incredibly abusive and toxic households. They watch their mothers get treated poorly, they get treated poorly, and the aftermath of that emotional carnage runs deep. It's not unlikely that many of these women and your mother develop a sort of codependency with their partners, an inability to be alone. And at the same time, the circumstances of their upbringing manifest themselves in their future relationships. This makes them a prime target for falling victim to abusers that will almost seem familiar due to how they were raised. And because these emotional issues were ironed into them in childhood, they become incredibly entrenched and are hard to excise with a simple conversation. And the message you sent me is a perfect example of this. I mean, we are looking at a man who has stolen $500 from your mother, has revealed himself to be a sexual predator, fights with her on a regular basis, and has the gall to continuously tell her that she is unattractive. And yet, despite all of that, she's still not breaking up with him. And while it's incredibly upsetting to think about, sadly, this is normal for someone who was likely raised the way that your mother was. You may not have told me about her upbringing, but the fact that she's putting up with this much really shows me that somewhere along the line in her childhood, her teen years, her household was likely not an emotionally safe place to be. It's very likely that her home life had an incredibly negative impact on her, and unfortunately that is now affecting your life today. And again, this is going to sound callous, but the best thing you can do to combat this, if you are living with them, is to move out as soon as possible. Until you can move out, because I know something like that can take time, for the sake of your mental and physical health and safety, reduce contact with this man as much as you possibly can. Because while you've given me no information here that says that he's physically violent, the fact that he is a predatory thief who routinely tells your mother that she's ugly and is not above verbally abusing you in her presence is a huge fracking red flag. And while I would love to tell you that there's some magic bullet to combat that, the best thing you can do as the child in the situation, whether you're a grown adult or not, it's your mother dating him, not you, is to reduce contact and protect your own mental and physical health. Because at the end of the day, abusers like this will not be swayed with just words. They will take any opportunity to take out their insecurities on any target they perceive to be vulnerable enough to attack. And it pisses me off, but all you can really do until your mother comes to her senses is to stay the frack away from him. After reading all of this, I'm honestly surprised and not surprised that no one has called the cops yet, considering you told me he's been fracking around with a minor. And given that I don't know your age and I'm going off the presumption that you're living with them, that is incredibly concerning to me, and I know it can be dangerous for someone in your position to call the police if you see something like that happening. Because sad but true, not every cop on the beat is actually going to do his fracking job and run this case into the ground and make sure that you're safe afterwards. I mean, I have heard of instances where the police show up and it gets worse afterwards because of course the abuser knows who ratted on them now. And that's why it drives me up a wall to say this, but I can't necessarily just be like, go to the police, because we don't know if that's going to make it worse for you afterwards. I am not a professional abuse intervention hotline, and that's why I'm left with stay the frack away from him. And even then, I know that that's not foolproof. As someone who also grew up feeling hunted in their own home, there is no way to completely zero out all interactions with someone who lives in your house. It's nigh impossible. And if it comes down to it, if it takes you leaving to preserve your mental health eventually when you can get to that place, you are in no way responsible for what happens after. You are not responsible as the child for what happens in your mother's life because of her decisions. It doesn't matter if you're 22 or 10. The child is not responsible for the romantic inclinations and emotional trauma of the parent. You are not a trained therapist. You do not need to save her from herself. You are not responsible for fixing her. There is little a child can usually do to convince a parent that what's going on around them is wrong. And given how that dynamic works, sometimes all you can do as the child is remove yourself from the situation. And while I really hope that she does eventually come to her senses and break up with him, this could take some time. And in the meantime, I just want to make sure that you're okay and you're healthy and you're safe. So until she yeets this man into the incinerator where he belongs, I want you to look out for yourself. Reach out to any friends and family that you feel comfortable with, and if it helps, look for online support groups of people who have been through the same thing you have, because the last thing I want you to feel is small and isolated, because you don't deserve any of this shit. This is the adults around you's mess, and they need to clean it up. So all that said, I am wishing you the absolute best, Bonbon. And while I'm sorry the answer isn't necessarily easy or immediately actionable, I really do hope you stay safe out there. I'm sure there will be plenty of people in the comments section who were raised in households who are currently experiencing something a little similar to what you went through. And I hope you can find some solace in the fact that it does get better. That you can move on with your life and grow in a much more healthy environment. And most importantly, at the end of the day, that you are not alone. I know that was kind of a serious ending to I'm Telling Tyler, but this one felt very important. And I suppose that's all the time we have tonight. One more time, if you would like to submit to I'm Telling Tyler, so long as it's at least Lolita adjacent, you can send your tea and or queries to imtellingtyler@gmail.com. I'd like to thank my patrons for making what you just saw possible. And should you like to join their number, you can head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolitanews for more content that I don't recommend anyone see for any reason. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you next time.